Hello beautiful people of the internet, this is the BYD Seagull. This is approximately 800 pounds and we're here to check if the Seagull still holds true of having a 300-kilometer range when you fill it with 4 passengers. So Kokoy Domingo 9942 commented, "Can you please add to your review if the range, 300 kilometers, is for one person only or what happens if you have 4 to 5 passengers? Also, if the aircon is needed to shut off or not." So the experiment is, we want to see the range when you fill this with 3 more passengers. But since Yuli and Jen are busy, I have to use weights instead. And if you're a gym bro and you can see the 12 plates over here, you know that this is 540 pounds. And with my included weight of 250 pounds, this makes a total of 790 pounds, which is almost an estimate of 200 pounds per passenger. And I think that's a good estimate of having 4 passengers in the vehicle. So the hypothesis is, if you fill this up with 4 passengers, the range will decrease. But the question is, by how much? So to get a conclusion, we're going to be gathering data. And thankfully, the BYD Seagull has a lot of readings that we can get the, different data. We're going to be checking the odometer reading just to be sure. We're going to be getting the estimated range at the point in time. So the estimated range at the start and the estimated range at the end. And then we're going to be getting the actual range driven. So if the estimated range says 260 kilometers, and then we drive 40 kilometers, and then it says there's 220 kilometers left on the estimated range, it means that despite having extra passengers, it's still able to have the range that it estimates. And it will be safe to say that the 300-kilometer range with a full set of passengers is viable. Now, if the estimated range says 260, and we drive 40 kilometers, and after the trip, the estimated range says that it's 200 kilometers left, that means there's 20 kilometers spent extra because of the weight of the vehicle. So now that we have the experiment laid out, the only thing left to do is to actually do it. So after that drive and after tabulating all the data, computing and all that stuff, we finally have the results. I will flash it here on screen, the results of the drive. I'll give you a few seconds to look at it. You can pause right now. Okay, now that we have that, let me explain what happened and the conclusions. So, when we started in Alabang, I had the charge of 87% and it had an estimated range of 255 kilometers. And then the odometer reading was 7,151, and then everything else was reset to 0. So from there, I decided to drive around the city and then get as much data as I could from that, which concluded with, from 87, it dropped down to 84%, and then the estimated range from 255 became 245, and then the actual distance was 5 kilometers worth of driving. So from there, you can see that I actually drove 5 kilometers, but the estimated range said that I dropped 10 kilometers. So there was a 5-kilometer loss worth of range. So going up the Skyway, driving through the Skyway, and then getting down the Skyway, the moment I got down the Skyway, this is the data that I got. From 84% at the start of the Skyway, it dropped down to 79%. And then the estimated reading from 245 kilometers, it dropped down to 234 kilometers. But with a driving of only 14.1 kilometers. But here's the interesting thing. The estimated range worth of loss was only 3.1 kilometers, which means that when it came to highway driving, it was more accurate, at least in terms of reading, or more efficient. And then I ended up in Green Hills after that. So from down the Skyway, I forced myself to Magallanes to go through the EDSA traffic, and it was pretty traffic. So if you look at the trip from Alabang all the way to Green Hills, so from 87%, I went down to 71%. And then the estimated range from 255, it was down to 207. My actual drive was 29.5 kilometers though, which means that the estimated range loss, when you compare it to the actual drive, it was 18.5 kilometers of a difference. So that's pretty huge. But for efficiency testing, it's actually best if you can go back and forth, because if the terrain is like going upward, you're going to get penalized for going upward, but you'll be rewarded for going downward. So we also got the data of the downward part. And in my case, what I did this time around was I wanted to see the disparity between city driving and highway driving. So I had short stops in between to get the data. We started with the city driving. So from Green Hills to Magallanes, so right before the Skyway. From 71%, it got down to 65%. And then the estimated range was 207 to 188. But the actual distance traveled was 10.9 kilometers. So which means that there was an 8.1 kilometer discrepancy. The efficiency of that drive was 12.6 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And with an average speed of 16 kilometers, which is very similar to Yuli's drive. So if you want to read this article, we'll try to put the link down below or up here as a card. And what Yuli got with an average speed of 15 kilometers per hour, so similar to mine, 16 kilometers per hour, is 9.32 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. From this, we can conclude the difference between no passengers and filled with passengers. When I touched the Skyway, I drove all the way to MCX and then finished MCX to do the highway driving. And the style of the highway driving was I was going at around 70 kilometers per hour, really maximizing efficiency, but not being too slow on the highway as well. For the highway driving, so from the Skyway Magallanes all the way to MCX, from 65%, I got down to 57%. And then the estimated range from 188 to 166 kilometers. But with an actual distance of 20.6 kilometers driven, the discrepancy between the estimated and the actual was only 1.4 kilometers. So it kind of follows. When it comes to highway driving, this is more accurate. And when it comes to city driving, it starts to show bigger discrepancies. For the highway driving, I got 9.8 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers worth of average energy consumption. So if I were to get the data of the whole trip, I started with 87%, I got down to 57%. An estimated range from 255, it went down to 166 kilometers, and my actual driving distance was 61 kilometers, which means that I had a discrepancy of 28 kilometers. And then the total efficiency of that whole trip was 14.16 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So before we go to the results and conclusions, we do have to keep this info in mind. So the curb weight of the BYD Seagull is 1,160 kilograms and a gross weight of 1,460 kilograms, which means that the payload of this one is 300 kilograms. Now, with me 250 pounds and I added 540 pounds additional, if you convert that to kilograms, we loaded this car with 359 kilograms, which means there was an excess weight of 59 kilograms. So, with that being said, let's talk about the efficiencies. BYD claims 10 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is realistic. Yuli, just one driver, no passengers, was able to get 9.32 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers with an average speed of 15 kilometers. So, me, driver, with 3 passengers weighing 180 pounds, I was able to get 14.16 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So, that's the data that was collected throughout this test. So, what are the stuff that we can conclude? So, first conclusion, the 300 kilometer range for one driver in the BYD Seagull is very realistic, especially for mixed driving. Conclusion number 2, with a driver and 3 passengers, so 4 in total, driving at 70 kilometers on the highway, it is more efficient to drive like that versus driving on the city with medium traffic. Next conclusion, if you compare the numbers between the BYD's claim and what we tested with a full set of passengers, there will be a disparity of 41%, which leads to conclusion number 4. With a full set of passengers, the BYD Seagull's estimated computed range is 211.86 kilometers of mixed driving. So if you plan to drive far with this car, we really suggest to start with a full charge and to top up along the way. That concludes our test for the average energy consumption of the BYD Seagull if you fill it with 3 more passengers. So if there's anything you want us to test, put it on the comment section down below. I'm reading the comments and I'll get to you as soon as possible. And I just want to say, if you reached this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching. And I'm Nick Scalanok, this is CarGuide.PH, and I'll see you on the next experiment.